Strongest man on earth, Mitchell Hooper here, and I am here to talk to you about why you should avoid high reps if you're trying to get strong. Now, we're going to go through these six major points. I'm going to explain each of them. And at the end, I'm going to explain who this exactly applies to. Now, first, energy expenditure. Second, skill building. Third, muscle fiber type. Fourth, injury risk. Five, varied recruitment patterns. And finally, the exercise selection doesn't match strength gain. So let's dive straight in. Point number one, energy expenditure. When you're doing reps higher than five, let's start thinking about how long that might take to complete. A hard set of six on squats or deadlifts, it very well could take 30 plus seconds. Now let's talk about energy systems in the first five. We all know that's phosphocreatine. Phosphocreatine is what's going to fuel that very early movement. After 5 seconds, we get to the glycolytic system where we're using glycogen locally stored in our muscles to perform that movement. So we have that element of, are we training the correct nervous system, or the correct energy system, I should say, to get peak strength. The other bit of energy expenditure is, to be strong, you want to be big. There's a reason that world's strongest men are all over 300 pounds. Nobody is 220 and rocking up and winning the contest. The reason for that is because weight does move weight. Even if it's fat, it does support your joints. Something like a squat, your stomach and your thighs are going to interact with each other, and you're naturally going to be able to lift more weight. If you lift with higher rep ranges, you're not going to be able to have the same effect and be able to put on the same amount of mass as you would in lower rep ranges. Or at least you're going to have a better ability to hold on to the mass that you currently have. Now, if you're doing that, you should save all of your energy, well, a vast majority of your energy, for fitness related work. If you do this, your fitness being high should be a priority, and I'll talk about that in a second, but your lifting itself is going to be strictly related to getting strong. Now let's talk about fitness. Why should we maintain any level of fitness if our goal is just to get strong? Well, recovery between sets, recovery between workouts, recovery between exercises is going to be really, really important. And your total work capacity is going to be important as well. We know that building strength doesn't require a huge amount of volume, it requires a huge amount of load. Now, if it's a huge amount of load, but your work capacity is really low, you're going to be 2 or 3 sets into a workout and you're going to feel like that's all you have to give. And this is the path that a lot of strength athletes go down. If you can have another set added while being able to recover, with the same load, this is going to be massive in terms of your strength gains. So, energy expenditure is reason number one. Reason number two is skill building. Lifting heavy weight is a skill. It is both a strength in a literal sense and a task by which you need to train yourself to complete. What is the skill itself? Well, the skill is being able to recruit the exact muscles that you want to be doing the job at hand. There's a reason that you can't think to contract your bicep and think, I'm going to contract my long head and then my short head. The reason for that is our brain has to group all muscles into what movements they can perform. So all we can think about is elbow flexion. Then if you want to flex your bicep, we have to think about elbow flexion and elbow extension so that your tricep equally flexes with your bicep and then your arm isn't being pulled in towards you. That's the only way that we can actually isolate and work muscles. Now, bodybuilders and people who train to be able to feel muscles, this is slightly different, but their brain is still cueing in movements that they are inhibiting in other ways to be able to get those muscles to work. We can never just flex a muscle for the sake of it. The skill side to that when it comes to getting strong is that you have to find the correct group of muscles in a compound movement to perform that movement efficiently, safely, and with as much muscle mass as possible. So if you're squatting, think about all the muscles involved in a squat. We're going to start with calves, go up to hamstrings and quads. We're going to have some level of tibialis anterior work going on. Our hip flexors are going to have to be engaged to help with core stability and hip stability. Our glutes will obviously be engaged. All of our core musculature, which I class as the muscles between the rib cage and the pelvis. Then your upper back has to be tight. Your arms are going to be tight because you're holding the bar. And all of these muscles have to coordinate to do their job. Something as simple as thinking or having a motor pattern ingrained too much to push the bar with your hands could shove that load onto your neck, could fold you forward in the squat, and could lead ultimately to failing the lift. Now, there's not the same amount of skill building if you're up above 5 reps. The reason for that is you're going to end up in a place where you're able to move this weight in more than one way. When we train for strength, we're not looking to go for max out every time. So let's accept you're doing a set of 8 with 2 or 3 left in the tank. This is now your 10 RM, and mathematically, that's going to be somewhere around 75% of your 1 rep max. If you think right now your 1 rep max deadlift in your head, take that weight, divide it by 4, multiply that by 3, or multiply it by 0.75. For me, I'm thinking a deadlift, a raw deadlift of 960 pounds. What is 75% of that? Well, we'll take off about 200 pounds. We're at 775. I can move 775 pounds with my hips high or my hips low or my legs stiff or really any way I want. And you'd be able to do the same thing with your 1RM. The reason that this is a problem is because we're going to tend to use the motor units that are going to benefit us for reps, not necessarily for pure strength. This is slightly different because we have many different muscle types in our body, and some types are designed to be more powerful. Sometimes some muscles are designed to be less powerful but more fatigue resistant. Let's take this logic to the extreme. If you're doing a set of 20, you're going to tend to use the fatigue resistant muscles, even if they're less powerful, just because they won't fatigue as quickly. The motor unit for heavy loads will not precisely match the motor unit for light loads. And this is a major problem because if you tried to use the motor units you're using for light loads for heavy loads, your injury risk is substantial. Your likelihood of hitting new PBs and not hitting plateaus is diminished. So, skill building is a major component. When we think of higher reps, the last bit with skill building is that a loss of technical control is so much more likely in higher rep ranges than in lower rep ranges, where you can start to get a bit sloppy. A set of 10 squats may or may not always look perfect. And when they don't, this is when inefficiencies come into play. Now, I mostly reject the notion that poor technique is going to lead to injuries, particularly if that's a technique that you're used to. But this is a caveat. If you generally have, let's say, textbook technique, and on rep number 10 on squats, you tend towards something that is less than ideal, less than technically perfect. Well, now we're going to be straining tissues locally. And if we think of progressive overload, you've locally overloaded that tissue to such a degree that it's likely you're going to get injured. Now, we touched on muscle fiber type, but that's actually point number 3. Muscle fiber is a really interesting and important concept, and really it describes the properties of muscle fibers. Generally speaking, we have type 1 muscle fibers, which are slow twitch, and we have type 2, which are fast twitch. You cannot shift type 1 to type 2 and make your whole body fast twitch and powerful. But within type 2, we have a range of different subtypes of these fibers, all the way from 2A to 2X. 2A being the most fatigue resistant and least powerful, all the way to 2X, which is the most powerful and the least fatigue resistant. When we lift heavy weight, our goal is to shift as many type 2 fibers over to X as possible because we want to be as explosive as we can be and as strong as we can be. If we accomplish that as a physiological training outcome, your ceiling for how much weight you're going to lift goes up. And of course, the opposite is true. If you do higher reps and we're tending towards type 2A, tending towards more oxidative fibers that are less powerful, more fatigue resistant, it's great for volume, it's great for work capacity, but it's not great for your strength. So you're actually going to be training the incorrect quality. Where I think that this conversation gets lost a lot is this is a good strategy for bodybuilders to use. The reason is volume seems to be the most important variable at the same level of intensity for bodybuilders. So why wouldn't they want their muscle fibers to be shifting towards the oxidative type that's going to be have a greater work capacity? Of course, that's going to be what they want to do. Now, this is not to say you can't do this all for any part of the year, 5+ reps. So I'm going to talk about that more at the end. But this is why peaking exists. That's why you never want to go from doing a 10 RM to a 1 RM just because the equation you read online said that you could hit a new PB. It doesn't work that way, and it's incredibly dangerous to try to work that way. So make sure you have proper peaking, get your muscle fiber types where they want to be. And this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about macrocycles and microcycles and periodization. Why does that all occur? Well, partially because your muscle fiber type is going to shift, meaning you're going to be conditioned for a slightly different thing. Now, if you're someone who needs a little bit of help with the structure of your training, I have many programs online. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Those are 100% written by me, and I would love to help you out and have you join the team. Now, number 4 is increased injury risk when doing higher volumes. This could be a little bit controversial, but hear me out. We're talking about someone who's looking to get strong. And if they're looking to get strong, we're going to assume that they're conditioning their body to be strong in lower rep ranges. Now, first of all, tendons and ligaments are soft tissues without blood supply, so it's much less likely that they're going to be able to keep up with your muscles. They don't adapt near as fast. If you have high volumes and you're growing your muscles, it's almost like you're upgrading the engine of your car, but you're not upgrading any other part with it. I'm not a car person, but let's say you're not upgrading the chassis and the wheel bearings and et cetera, and your car's getting heavier, and you're just negating some of the important elements that would contribute to the car being good other than just having a big engine. This is why bodybuilders are sort of like they're the car where you pull up the hood and everyone can look and go, "Ah, that is an incredible engine. You look, and it's amazing." And then you put that car up beside a Tesla where you open up you look for the engine and you don't even see one, and that's the arms of strongmen, unfortunately. But then they race each other, and the Tesla would be way faster, way more capable than the car with an impressive engine. Most of the time, car people don't come at me. You get what I'm saying. Now, we see this a lot when bodybuilders try to train strength, and it's often catastrophic. There's that video of the incline bench press that never leaves my head, rent free, where he pops a pec off. And the most interesting bit of this is a guy who's training with Larry Wheels. The most interesting part to this is the post before they were doing heavy deadlifts, and he sort of said, like, just getting thrown into the water of strength training, or training heavy for something different with Larry Wheels. It indicated that he had just started trying to do heavy work, and he did exactly what I said is a terrible idea of going from traditional high rep bodybuilding training to low rep strength training. High injury risk when you're doing that. Now, when we go to higher rep ranges, fatigued muscles tend to spasm, and spasm plus load equals tear and muscle damage. Right? So to play that out, we have a relatively poor understanding of why spasms happen in the first place, but we do know it's associated with malnutrition. It's associated with really high work volumes and fatigue. So if you're doing a high volume, you're fatigued, you come down bench press and you have the weight in your hands and then your pec spasms, well, it's going to put in an inordinate amount of force on your pec tendon. And that's when something like that can start to give. Load plus spasm is definitely dangerous. We also then have the technique failures that can lead to muscle spasm and strains. I do want to be clear, this is not the leading cause of injury. I reject that premise altogether, but it is a factor. Now, if you have a technique you're used to and that technique shifts because you're tired after rep 10 and you're trying to you use more quad on the first 5 reps of your squats, and then you leaned over a little bit more for the next 5, but you're not used to that and you tear a proximal hamstring tendon, it's not the craziest concept in the world. The last bit here is it's very tough to calculate weekly progressions when you're doing high volumes. Let's say you're doing a 225 bench and you're doing a 3 by 10, and the next week you want to up the weight a little bit. So you go from a 225, you slap some fives on, which are the smallest plates that most people use. You're doing 235 for 3 sets of 10. Well, increase 10 pounds for 10 reps is 100 pounds. Multiply that by 3 is now 300 units that you have increased your workload. That's a lot compared to a 325 bench, then go into a 345 bench if you're doing 2 doubles, which would be something like an 80-pound increase for a much larger load increase. So the point is, you have to be very cautious and careful with your load increases when volumes are high. And this is why I always promote progressing on a percentage basis to make sure that we're not just using these absolute numbers, the smallest plates that you can find in that 5 minutes at the gym, and you're able to progress much more slowly and reasonably. I always say 2% on the low end to 5% on the high end. That is the range by which you should be aiming for to be able to progress your strength week over week. Any less than that, you're not really getting anywhere. Any more than that, and you are in danger of injuring yourself. Couple that with a deload every 4 to 6 weeks, and you're in a pretty good spot to be able to progress for a long time. Point number 5, varied recruitment patterns. Your body will slightly change technique on every rep. And this is a healthy thing. And this is something that we want, the movement variability. So you start to learn what you're able to do more efficiently, what feels stronger. And that exploration is really useful. But it's not useful if we're trying to hone in how to move heavyweight. You're simply going to learn how to move lightweight. Now, there's one of two things that are going to happen if you do higher volumes. Either one, you're going to use the stretch shorten cycle pretty heavily, as in you're going to descend the weight pretty quick and just explode it off of you and rip through the reps that way and make them look as powerful as possible. That's all well and good, uh, sort of. Or you're going to move the weight very slowly so that you're working the muscles as hard as possible and you're losing power. Now, there's problems on both sides of these. If you're moving the weight quickly to take advantage of the stretch shorten cycle, we're not really learning how to move the weight well with our strength. We're learning how to bully the weight with power. Power and strength are overlaps, but not the same thing. Power is how quickly can you express the strength that you have, and strength is how much load can you move. If you're not that strong but extremely powerful, it's very possible that you do your power training at, say, 100-pound bench press, and then you load up 150 pounds and it just gets stapled to your chest because you have so much power, but you don't have the raw strength to push through. On the flip side, if you move slowly and you're working the muscles hard, well, you're going to get a good muscular hypertrophy response, but you're not going to get much of a response in terms of your strength and power. You're going to have to lighten the load quite a bit to keep the tension on the muscle the whole time. You're not intending to move the weight fast at any time. So you're actually training a level of co-contraction to stop you from moving the weight quickly. Those two things together are meaning that you're not going to be near as strong or move near the load that you might be able to. And of course, when we're trying to get strong, moving more load is key. And last point, point number 6 is exercise selection with high volumes does not match exercise selection if you're trying to get strong. The reason for this is that compound movements aren't great in high rep ranges. Tom Platz might disagree, but let's use deadlifts for an example. A set of 15 deadlifts is simply going to blow up your back and your glutes, and you're not really going to get a full overall experience of what a good deadlift should feel like, because a good deadlift should feel like your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your low back, your upper back, that they're all working in conjunction, equal with each other. But from experience, if you do a set of 15 or a set of 10, there's a particular area of your body, if it's a compound barbell movement, that seems to take the brunt. More often than not, it's going to be your low back. For some people, it could be quads, but there's going to be an area, and that area is going to give out first, and that is not the most useful if you're doing higher volumes, and not the most useful to get strong. Now, machine work is more practical for higher rep ranges, in my opinion. In practice, there's less control, there's less skill involved, so you can maintain that plane of motion and still work very, very hard and know that you have the same movement pattern, training the same thing. But machines do not translate overly well to strength with free weights, and every strength test you're going to come across, for the most part, any strength test you're going to come across that holds water is going to use a free weight. Generally speaking, deadlift, bench press, and squat are going to be how people measure their strength. No one really asks you, no one has the goal, I should say. No one has the goal to go to a chest press machine and go like, "Oh, I can't wait to tell people I chest press machined 275 or something like that." I'm sure it happens, but it's pretty rare. So I suppose the caveat is if your goal is to get strong on machines, use machines. Most people want to get strong with barbells, in which case you should use barbells. And in that case, doing high volumes is going to be very difficult. Now, there are a few caveats to this. No more than 5 reps is advice for compound movements in strength blocks. There are certain movements like accessories, let's say any sort of rowing movement, that in my experience, trying to do that for very low reps is going to actually be working against you. A pendlay row would be the only example that I can think of that would be an exception, but a lat pull down, a bent over row, if you're doing 3 reps, you're going to start rolling your shoulders over. You're going to do everything you can just to get the work done. And this isn't necessarily what we're looking for. If you're trying to get strong in a movement pattern, you train the movement pattern. If you're training muscles to support that movement pattern, you think about and you train the muscles. So we need to be cognizant of that when we're talking about accessory work. Last thing, this information is useful for experienced lifters. If you're a novice lifter, you could go 5 reps, 10 reps, 20 reps. You could even go for a run and build some muscle that way if you start from a sedentary place. It does not need to be overcomplicated or complicated at all until you get into the groove. You've been training for a couple of years, you're now experienced, and you now need more specific training. But if you're not training right now for strength, you can just go into the gym, work relatively hard in a resistance training environment, and be able to make gains both in size and in strength, regardless of rep range that you choose. Hopefully you guys pulled something from that video. Leave a comment on what you think 1 to 5 reps is going to accomplish the best. Leave a comment if you disagree with me that 1 to 5 reps is what you need to stick to if you're looking to get strong. It's common sense to people who know really well, but hopefully this adds some rationale to common sense. And for those of you who didn't know this before, now you have a little bit more information to go smash your next session. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind. If you want to support the channel, subscribing is the easiest option. And if you can pick up some lift heavy, be kind merch, that's linked in the comment and in the description. Go ahead and do that and get other people comfortable in the gym as well. Thank you for watching. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind, and we will see you tomorrow.